Hey, Patrick here. What you're about to listen to is an interview that we did with lefttuber Gutian. This is our first ever interview, and we had a few audio issues, including a loud storm that began halfway through the recording. I did my best to clean up the audio, but there's still a few hiccups here and there, so I hope that's okay. Now on with the interview. Hey, welcome to another episode of Up the Down Escalator. We have a special episode for you today because we are joined by breadtuber Gutian. Hey, Gutian, how you doing?
Yeah, doing good, doing fine.
Great. So, we're me and Brandon. My name's Patrick, by the way, and my co-host name's Brandon. We are straight cis white people. Like we. And we're like, we've been leftists for a long time, and we are very much, for trans rights, but because, like, for me, like, I don't have, like, a whole lot of trans friends, and that's just a consequence of, me not having friends in general. I mean, I have a couple of trans friends, but I've never gotten a chance to really kind of, like, understand what that experience is like for, like, people like yourself and anyone else who's in the trans or NB community.
Yeah, and especially someone in a kind of a slightly different society from ours, because we're both very, I wish it weren't so, I wish I were a little more experienced, but my brain is just always looking at everything through the lens of being an American. So, I think probably the main question I have for you is, like, your YouTube channel is, it's not all over the place, but you have a lot of opinions. You're really well informed on everything you talk about. So I kind of want to know, like, why'd that all start? Like, what kind of drove you to starting the channel?
Okay, so I've covered this before with some people, but basically, initially speaking, the reason why I kind of got into doing content creation was mostly to do with the fact that I was working on a media studies / film degree. So one of the big things from that was the idea that, like, you need to, like, build, like, a CV of some kind based off of either stuff you've done in the course or like exterior stuff outside the course. And then I realized that, oh well, technically speaking, any YouTube stuff I do is media studies, it is media analysis, is that kind of thing. So therefore I can include that as part of my coursework. Oh, cool. So that was what initially got me into it way back, what was it, like 6 months ago, 8 months ago now, something ridiculous.
Is that when you started your YouTube channel?
YouTube channel was created in September of last year, but I created the channel, thought about what I could make the videos, and then I ended up just kind of giving up on trying to make videos at all, because I couldn't figure out what I would want to make or what I could even do. So I was like, there's just no point me trying to do anything. So I didn't bother doing something for, like, I don't even know what it was, like 7 or 8 months, I think. And then I talked to people about that, and they said, oh well, if you do, you need to make a CV. I was like, oh shit, well, if I make videos, then I can, like, include that. So I was like, okay, crap, I'll make some videos. Start. I officially started 8 months ago, I think, now. Okay. The end of April or something.
Cool. So you mentioned you were studying what was it, media?
Yeah, I'm currently doing a media studies / sociology degree.
Oh, cool. I didn't know about the sociology. I think I heard you mention in one of your videos that you did philosophy for a little bit. Is that right?
Yeah, I have done 2 years of philosophy before I dropped out of that degree.
You said you hated it, right?
Yeah, I think the problem with it for me was that quite often a lot of the concepts that you see being talked about in philosophy, normally what they do is they normally take it up to a point where, especially once you get later on, like early years of philosophy are generally, like, pretty basic, pretty stripped down, like trying to be, like, as relevant as they possibly can to, like, real world circumstances. But then when you start getting later on, they get much more theoretical, and it starts getting a lot harder to, like, see the links that it specifically has to, like, actual real world situations. Yeah. Which is probably the biggest weakness of most philosophy, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. See, so I have a philosophy degree, so I did the whole thing. I understand. I understand how you feel about that. But for me, it's kind of become like a passion for me, and it's kind of part of the reason why we're doing this podcast. But despite your misgivings on it, you seem to be pretty like philosophically inclined in your thinking.
Like regardless of, at the end of the day, philosophy kind of ends up working its way into almost everything that you do to a degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like if you do anything sociology related, social related, or anything like generally like media construction related kind of things, you'll end up having to like include some level of like philosophical thinking in like the way that you like talk about things. Yeah, and I definitely utilize certain philosophical concepts. And like my current degree, I'm still doing like another like 2 or 3 philosophy papers for it because I need extra credits to fill out my course, which is
that's for sociology. You said?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, okay. One thing is recently, you recently did a video on Sargon of Akkad, right?
Yep.
About the Epic of Gilgamesh, and unfortunately, I have not been able to watch that yet. But I also heard you were supposedly going to be maybe doing a debate with Sargon of Akkad.
Yep, the debate is currently in works. We're still planning that one out.
Okay. I thought it fell through. Are you still like in communication with these people?
They ended up responding like 4 days after I messaged them, because we were organized. We had like an actual decent organization. There's something going to happen, and then they started replying for a bit, and I hit them up. I was like, hey, let's look at it. Like, so maybe the end of this week, possibly.
Oh wow, that's cool. That seems like it would be a boost for your career.
Potentially, I don't know. Sargon's a little bit old hat. I mean, it's more just like debating him is more just I look back at all the big YouTubers that got to debate Sargon. I'm like, you know what? Like, kind of a dream.
Well, yeah. I mean, did you watch Vosh's debate with Sargon of Akkad, which happened recently?
I watched about half of it, I think.
Yeah. What'd you think of that?
I think ultimately it was the moderator was, I don't know if the smartest moderation was to have someone who was like friends with Sargon as a moderator.
Yeah.
Like a real idea. I think ultimately it showcased the same issue that I think Sargon's always had, which is that he just isn't very good at anything.
Yeah,
and
I would tend to agree with that. I mean, for me,
he definitely seemed very unqualified with his opinions.
It came across to me that like Vosh, I mean, I have a bias because I'm a leftist, obviously, but like it seemed like Vosh took him to town, and he was, Vosh didn't, land every single point, but Sargon of Akkad, like even though he's such a shit dude, like. He still like seems to know how to like manage a debate situation, even though he doesn't really actually make any points, I don't know.
No, he understands the thing behind a debate, which is like online debates, which is they're not proper academic debates. The purpose is not to provide the most cohesive logical argument in a way that is both convincing to the people that are watching and convincing to everything else. And like the aim is to win, is to come out as the strongest person and to, make the other person look foolish and push them on their weak points and that kind of thing, right? Like that's the main goal. And I think a lot of people could do to learn that if they're going to be engaging in online debates, because a lot of people try to go and treat it like either like a conversation or treat it like a like academic debates, and it's not either of those things.
So do you have any idea what you might be talking to him about? I mean, if you're not down for talking about that, that's cool, but I'm just curious.
The initial thing is going to be we're going to be arguing about the predominantly the Epic of Gilgamesh thing, because cool. He's claiming that I've completely misunderstood exactly what he was attempting to do with that thing, but he's provided me like 4 or 5 different accounts of like what I'm trying to do or what like he was trying to do. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what his position is on that, because so far none of it's really holding up very well at all. So I've got no idea exactly what his defense is.
Yeah, so I haven't kept up with this stuff, like with what is Sargon of Akkad trying to do with the Epic of Gilgamesh? What kind of point is he trying to make about that? It's just it's something about that just seems like kind of strange to me, considering his I don't know, like what he does. Like what does the Epic of Gilgamesh have to do with anything that is a part of his whole thing?
So the predominant reason I think he's done the Epic of Gilgamesh is because like buys into the brand of like the Sargon brand, as like it's a very old tale that was an Akkad. The Akkadians like to talk about it a lot, so it kind of buys into that imagery, I think. I guess also he has got a video on one of his other channels from a long time ago, like 3 years ago, of him reading the entire thing, which means that he does in fact read it. So I'm curious to know how he fucked it up so badly. Mm-hmm. But ultimately one of his major defenses, the defense of most of his fans, has been that it was just a joke. It was just a big old 40-minute long shit post, which which I've taken issue with, because he admitted in the private DMs that we had that it wasn't just a joke, that there was semi-serious, because ultimately he ends it with like presenting 4 different morals of the story that he had. So I'm like, so you clearly were trying to get a message across here, because you ended with morals, you ended with an actual like lessons that you wanted people to learn from it. So it wasn't just a comedic like poorly read version of the Epic of Gilgamesh like presented to people. Like you actually were trying to teach people something.
Right.
So and the morals that he took away from it were like incredibly crap. None of them were like really well linked, I think, to like the actual like story of the Epic of Gilgamesh, like in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. So I'll be looking forward to that. I'll probably definitely catch the debate. That sounds like it'll be a lot of fun. Do you feel confident about that going into it?
Yeah, I have confidence that it's going to be very hard for me to lose to Sargon of Akkad in a debate setting, because he's not very good in them, and B, he's admitted multiple times that he has only been able to watch 10 minutes of my video so far.
Well, he only watched 10 minutes?
Yeah. Before he like reposted it.
Isn't that pretty much like what he does? Like he just responds to like a headline and the first basically 5 minutes of anything that he responds to.
Yeah, which is going to be a problem for him, because that means that I come prepared having watched like his video 5 or 6 times over, so I have much more capability to discuss what he's been doing compared to what he can talk about. All
right, cool. So you said you're studying sociology now. So would you say that like gender theory is a part of that?
Yeah, to a degree. Gender theory is not an explicit part of that, but it definitely, in the same way that like any conversation about social construction and stuff is going to end up mentioning gender as a thing. I actually think for my psychology as a social science course, we're talking about that.
Okay, cool.
There is a two 3 weeks dedicated to like discussing the idea of social construction and whatnot.
Yeah. So I like I said, I got a philosophy degree, but I never took a gender theory class at all. I did attend a lyceum once when I was in college that was all about gender theory, and apart from that, and just seeing other leftists talk about it, I haven't studied it that much. I've read bits and pieces of Judith Butler. So, like, what are your thoughts on gender theory in general? And what do you think would be the basics for someone who maybe doesn't understand gender theory? What would be a good way to explain gender theory to someone who might not understand it, or someone who's new to leftism?
Okay, so I guess probably the biggest issue of gender theory is that ultimately it's not even that concrete in leftist circles. I mean, we have a variety of different people have like a variety of different like beliefs that they kind of hold to and stuff. And it's not like the idea of like what gender is and how we deal with gender is not consistent across a lot of like leftist content creators. I would say that ultimately the one that I kind of ascribe to is the belief or the understanding that gender is a system that we've effectively built as a particular culture or society as a way of understanding specific biological patterning in a much more simplified version of that, and that we effectively built long-term cultural traditions around that don't necessarily have any root in any kind of actual serious hard kind of science or whatnot. Like it's right. Which is what comes under the gender performance idea of gender performance or whatnot, and that right. Gender is a performative element of a society.
Right. Yeah. Did you what drove you to get into sociology?
Predominantly the fact that it's human society, human social construction is probably one of the biggest things that like basically defines the way that we interact with one another and the way that we live together as communities. And it's kind of it leans heavily into basically anything that we attempt to talk about when it comes to, effectively any kind of cultural social interaction is effectively defined by the way that we view our society, or the way that we view our history, and the way that we kind of come to understand that.
Do you have anything you want to jump in with, Brandon?
I think that's really fascinating. Sociology and psychology to me are probably the most important fields of study today in science, especially with just the way our society is evolving. And I feel like it's been accelerated in the past few decades and has steadily been doing so since the Industrial Revolution. So yeah, it's definitely important. And I have noticed that like that also, like you're very philosophical minded. I've noticed that, but on your videos especially, the kind of your sociology geek comes out a little bit, and that's you have a nice mix of understanding of different topics. I think kind of my what I'm interested in is like what's kind of the main goal with your message and your topics and your channel.
Sure. I guess the inherent, I mean, the ultimate baseline goal is the goal that I probably tell anybody to follow, which is that I enjoy talking about it and I enjoy doing it, and there's a drive to do that, a drive that would exist regardless of how well the channel did or how well liked things would be, or how much they're watched or how much anything like that. I mean, right? Like there's that initial drive to do content that's going to exist regardless of other people's interaction with it. That's probably the initial big reason why I kind of do things, and that's the only reason that like I carried through the first 2 or 3 months basically when I didn't have like any subs and any views at all, was because I enjoyed doing the content to the degree that it was like I would get back and I would want to record a video, I'd want to do writing a video, I want to do editing for a video kind of thing. But beyond that, there's I guess there's this element of like there's so many things that a lot of leftists I think don't appreciate in the way that like the world, like the way that we have our society currently built, or the way that we currently like think of ideas and whatnot. And I want to like try to push through like the very like basic, because a lot of people like to, I mean, there's a lot of leftists that do big, talk pieces on a specific topic, or they do very much more politically focused or whatnot minded kind of videos. Whereas I like to think of it like you can take most of things try to do is take an individual thing that's come up, an individual issue that's popped up, and try to figure out what exactly is going on behind that makes that such a thing that people want to talk about, right? So like a critique behind an individual issue or an individual circumstance. And then sometimes there are just videos I just do for fun because I want to do them. Not all the videos fall into that categorization. Some of the videos I just do because I want to work on them, which is I guess my celebrity video would fall into more of the I want to work on it categorization, because that one's an awful lot of work without any of the things that would potentially make it very popular. So I don't know how well it's going to do.
Yeah, and kind of something I talk about with pretty much everybody that I run into, and Patrick and I talk about this often. So we were talking earlier how, we know very little about New Zealand, to be honest. We're just uninformed. And like I said, that's probably
America's
because...
a bubble.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
But the state of the world has definitely been dominated by American politics in a lot of ways recently, and I kind of want to get your take on kind of, because you mentioned you're doing the UK video, just kind of your take on like where you think things are going, and more importantly, what you think the best thing we can do is, especially as most likely it's going to be millennial socialists who are going to be like listening to any of us. So kind of what do you think is the best steps we can be taking?
I guess there's some dispute between people over this one. I generally fall into the categorization of like, until someone can showcase to me an immediate circumstance where we can feasibly have like a revolution or some kind happening right now, I'm going to stick to trying to do more reformationist sort of things.
Yeah, I think we'd both mostly agree with you on that.
So I guess like I'm working on trying to I'm trying to be like, hey, like we need to vote for people that are attempting to at least put ideas that are in line with what we want to see enacted in the world across. So people like, I guess like in the US, be voting for Bernie Sanders, try to push Bernie Sanders. For in the UK, it would be trying to get Jeremy Corbyn in. And because the while they might not be, explicitly very left wing, like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's far better to have them in than to have someone like Donald Trump or someone like Joe Biden or Boris Johnson or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
In my opinion, at least with my experience here in the States, Bernie Sanders is the furthest left candidate that I think we've ever seen, which is a unique opportunity for people here in the States. And I guess it's probably true of the UK as well, with Jeremy Corbyn, although I'm not as familiar with that. And it's not just that Bernie Sanders is the furthest left presidential candidate. He's the furthest left senator that we've had, like, for the past decades that he's been working in politics. So yeah, I kind of see it like, social democracy as a type of transitionary stage towards a fuller socialism. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree that ultimately the aims of a social democracy is effectively the enacting of welfare systems and the enacting of return of certain rights to workers and whatnot in a way that attempts to, I assume, make them more palatable to the general population. Like an immediate drastic change to the current system is probably too much to ask of people, but if you enact small changes that then people see as being a good thing, then it becomes harder to, ultimately those things kind of like get stuck in as like things that are just accepted as existing. I would say probably healthcare is a good example of that one. If you compare healthcare in other countries to healthcare in the US, like the fact that healthcare is still a battle that is going on over there is normally seen by other countries like the UK or like New Zealand or like Australia as batshit crazy, because in those countries there's public healthcare already existing as a thing, and while there are arguments over like how much funding it deserves or how much funding it gets, the idea of it being taken away would be universally like you would there's no way you would ever like maintain like any political credence at all if you try to remove that. Like you would lose immediately.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, what is the healthcare system like in New Zealand?
The healthcare system in New Zealand is predominantly public healthcare, universal healthcare, but there are a few things that are not covered by that are under private healthcare things, or there are things that there are private healthcare organizations that effectively the public healthcare system will use, but you can effectively pay to get those ones if you want to like go for those ones quicker. But those are not normally those are normally ones that are reserved for stuff that's not considered life-threatening or life-endangering. So a lot of the plastic surgery stuff, if you go for the public healthcare system, you go into a wait list for it. If it's not an immediate concern, plastic surgery kind of thing, then you would be on a wait list, and the wait list could be a couple of months, 3 months to a year sort of thing. But if you paid privately, you could get into it much quicker.
Right. So is there like actual like private insurance companies in New Zealand?
There's I think the ones who've got the insurance companies are dental ones.
Really? So
Yeah.
what avenue of private, if it's not like insurance, like what are the private healthcare companies like? How do they work?
So, like I said, but basically, the reason there's no necessity for there to be an insurance is because most of the private healthcare stuff is reserved purely for stuff that's not immediate concern.
Right.
So, if it's like cancer or something, cancer is never going to be a private healthcare thing. Cancer would be a public healthcare thing, and it would be, and probably you'd be pushed through to an emergency kind of thing on that one. Like the amount of times. So, also, like I said, like there is, even with like the dental healthcare thing, there are some things like if I currently have wisdom teeth going through. So far, no issues with my wisdom teeth, but if there were issues, like I say, there was some sort of impacting molar kind of thing, or impacting kind of like, I can't what's called impacting or whatever, where it's like the wisdom tooth comes through and pushes into the other side of one of the ones. If that was the case, I could then go to a dentist, and that would be done through public healthcare.
Okay, I see.
Like I said, like the dentist thing is normally reserved for if it's a situation that's not like it's causing you pain that like you physically cannot like do well or exist as well as you possibly can, then it would go probably the public healthcare would cover that one. But otherwise, if it's just like dentist checkups and that kind of thing, that would be through private healthcare insurance or private dentist. Yeah,
that's really interesting. And the reason why I ask is because there's been a debate here in the States about the role of private insurance, and it's really caused a big split among the more, centrist avenues of leftist politics. There's even like a debate recently on Twitter that I got involved with where a trans girl was basically making the argument that like if the United States were to do a full-on Medicare for all type of system and we banned private insurance, then it would leave Medicare for all basically vulnerable for people who are trans, and it would leave it would basically mean that there would be only one option. If, say, for example, the Republicans decided to cut medical issues for trans people out of Medicare for all, then they would have nowhere else to go, was kind of the argument that some were making. And it was an interesting argument. It was something I actually didn't really have much of a response to. Do you have any thoughts on that based on your experience in New Zealand?
So the thing would basically, I think, predominantly would boil down to you would need to make there is a way you can have private healthcare as a thing, but you would have to absolutely make it so that the private healthcare as it relates to either life-threatening or life-endangering surgeries or circumstances would be only public healthcare, because otherwise, not having it as like that kind of thing would basically mean that would leave it basically up to the private health companies could effectively abuse the public healthcare system when it comes to like that kind of like life-threatening surgery sort of stuff.
Right.
And it would create competition between public and private healthcare, which is around that kind of thing. As far as non-endangering healthcare kind of things goes, I think those ones there wouldn't be ridiculous to maintain a level of private healthcare around those ones, or the ability for there to be private healthcare around that kind of stuff. And also, I mean, the biggest issue with that kind of thing is that it boils down. The assumption there is normally that if we all of a sudden just go with public healthcare, then there is only public healthcare means there's only one option, there's only one like healthcare system. Which even in places with public healthcare, where like you have like I don't know the NHS in the UK, or you have whatever I can't remember what it's called over here in New Zealand exactly, something like the NHS as well. But like that system is not a universal one. So like I said, like there are doctors that while you can effectively get through, you can go from the healthcare system to those doctors. You can also just go to those doctors by yourself if you want to, right? Or you would normally have your own personal doctors that you pay for, but those doctors are normally the cost of doctors is normally subsidized by the government.
Right.
So I have a doctor who is not part of who is technically they're part of it because they're subsidized by the government, by the healthcare system, but they're not, in a hospital. They're not in a thing. They're in their own health practice. And there's like, I think there's about like my city alone. There's like, I think about 15 or 16 different health practices around town that are all subsidized to various degrees. So you can normally you can try and track down one that's going to be better for like your kind of purposes, right? Like we have like what I'm going to is generally I chose because the person I was talking to for my kind of thing was saying how like they'd done a lot of work with trans people, so they knew a lot of the trans issues and they knew a lot of like that kind of stuff. So they were the best person to go through for that kind of thing. It's like.
Okay.
So even on a public healthcare system, if assuming it's modelled after the NHS and the one over here in New Zealand, which based off what I've read of the bill, I can see that it seems to be mostly be based off that.
Yes.
If anything, the issues for trans people will remain about the same.
That was my initial thought. It was just I had a hard time figuring out how to articulate that because it was an argument I hadn't heard before. But that makes a lot of sense.
The issue with the protection kind of thing it would fall under the exact same issues that private healthcare is currently dealing with, which is that if you remove protections for trans people, then it affects their private healthcare as well. I mean, like right now, you can have doctors in the US, like doctors and nurses in the US and paramedics and stuff can refuse to help a trans person if they don't like that kind of thing, right? Exactly.
That's not everywhere, but there are like the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which started in Illinois, protects that kind of action.
From what I'm aware of, last month, I think it was either the start of last month or the end of October, I can't remember which department it was, but one of the departments under Trump removed trans people from a protected group. Trans and gay people are no longer considered a protected group.
Yeah, as government employees or contractors. Yep.
Yeah. Which means that ultimately there isn't as a protected group, therefore that like removes their ability to not be fired or whatnot from those positions, or to be or for people to decline that on the basis of that kind of things, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
so,
and that started with the was it last year with the ban of trans people in the military, which even super right-wing Americans were like, what are you doing, dude? It's the military. If they want to serve, let them serve.
Yeah.
But I think that's been definitely a kind of a shadow agenda that most people aren't really picking up on, because I heard it called all caps racism the other day, and like, yeah, that's basically what he's doing. And he's just, that whole section of society is just biased against anybody who's not, a straight white person.
Yeah. I think predominantly a lot of the anti-trans, anti-gay stuff is not coming from. Honestly, I don't think it's coming from Trump, because I don't think Trump gives a shit. It's predominantly, I think it's coming from Mike Pence and other people.
Yeah, I think definitely the floodgates that opened in 2016, which we were all very, very surprised by it, because growing up, I thought, there weren't racists and there weren't homophobes, and if there were, they didn't talk about it. And overnight, everything changed. And so it just kind of revealed the actual opinions of most Americans, our parents to a certain extent included. And it was kind of earth-shattering. And there has been progress made kind of across the board in more progressive circles here. I don't know how it goes anywhere else in the world, because we're basically stuck here trying to dig our way out of the grave, so to speak.
Dig our way out of Trump, and we have no time to pay attention to anything.
Yeah.
I think the biggest issue is that idea of the floodgates idea, or the idea that like Trump has dug America into a hole kind of thing. In the past like 3 or 4 years, what I've learned from talking to a lot of, especially predominantly people of color or trans people or whatnot who live in the US currently, or lived in the US for the past 10, 20, 30 years kind of thing, is that for a lot of them, this idea that all of a sudden things just got worse under Trump is inaccurate, because things were worse beforehand. It's just that no one talked about it or cared about it because of the fact that there were there wasn't a focus on it at all, and that if anything, the Trump thing has just shone more of a light on the issue than it has exacerbated it as such.
I think things have gotten actually slightly worse, but I mean, the problems have always been there, and they've just been obscured by the pretty rhetoric that normal politicians usually throw at us,
And also, frankly, America has not been very integrated for long, and it just isn't in general. So, I met a friend a few years ago, and he was from South Dakota, and he was 24 years old, and we were in the city, and he was like, "What? This is weird." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "I've never seen, a black person." I was like, "Are you kidding me?" He's like, "No, I've never met a person of color in person." And that
blows my mind.
Yeah, it's kind of an exaggeration, but it's pretty accurate to how I personally, how I feel and how most white Americans live, is that everyone's got their black friend or their gay friend or something like that. And it's pretty bad in general. It's not a good way to treat people, and we do it without even thinking about it. And so I think you're absolutely right that things didn't just get worse overnight. It's just a lot of frankly, a lot of white people just said, "Oh, that's what you're dealing with," because the KKK was marching in the streets, and we hadn't seen that before. It was all kind of underground and hidden from the nice, fancy, gentrified part of our culture.
Yeah. I think a good example for that would be probably police shootings and whatnot, which have only become massively noticed by people in the past 2 or 3 years. But I've talked, basically
it's
every
been a problem for decades.
I've talked to has mentioned that they have had one person that they know of being killed by police sometime in the past 10 years. So every single person, and that's a thing that and you could talk to white people, and white people will have basically they only hear of police violence when it's through the TV or through people of color talking about it. There's not this kind of this realization that everybody knows someone who's died of it kind of thing, right? Who's been killed by police.
I do think there's a little bit of a silver lining, though, because I think ever since Trump got elected, there's been a push to the left here in the States. Or at least there's a lot more people, it seems to me, and this is just anecdotal, but it seems like a lot more people are waking up and then going "Oh, I see what's going on. I think maybe I should do something about it." Because, when you see news stories that there's actual concentration camps, that kind of makes some people go well, shit, I feel bad that I haven't been paying attention to this whole time, and so more people are getting involved. I mean, maybe I'm just being too optimistic, but
well, polls show that more people in the United States than ever identify as socialist and are politically active now. And I mean, we do have a short attention span as a country, so it's entirely possible that could just end in 2020. But it is encouraging to see a movement towards at least something a little more progressive, like they have in New Zealand and England and the Scandinavian countries and even France to an extent.
And another thing that's crazy about reactionaries here in the United States is that I've been arguing with people about this stuff forever, and just explaining the same thing over and over again to someone and them still just not getting it is so frustrating. And I don't know.
There's movements towards as far as social ideas, and I think that's probably both a combination of things getting worse or things looking significantly worse for a lot of people. Basically, the climate change, income inequality are two of the biggest ones I can think of that have become more and more present as an issue in the past 10 years kind of thing. But I also think it's a combination as well, the fact that we're moving further and further away from the virulent anti-communist, anti-socialist sentiment of the 1960s, 1950s, which the very, very anti-Soviet propaganda sort of stuff, anti-communist propaganda is becoming less and less a memory for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about that recently, actually, and it's definitely, I think it's mostly just people our age, you know, people who aren't boomers, basically. They didn't grow up with the Red Scare. They didn't grow up with, you know, the propaganda around the Vietnam War. And so we've just kind of grown up with, you know, the internet and the world at our fingers and watching all these things happen. Like, I remember a lot of what happened in South Africa because I was watching TV when I shouldn't have been. And that kind of shook me to my core as a child. And it kind of shaped who I am and what I think about things in the world. So I look at the world much more empathetically than I think my parents would like me to or expected me to, just because of the way I was raised. And
I think a lot of boomers, because of like the fear that was instilled in them by like McCarthyism, Red Scare, whatever, has made them want to shut off from the world in some ways. Because, you know, during the Cold War, like, people were afraid that the world was going to explode at any moment, you know, with a nuclear weapon or whatever. And I don't know. And it's like, I've tried to explain to my parents and to other people, like, this is not how they do things in other developed countries. And like, for some reason, they just don't care about like what's been shown to work in other countries. And I can't figure out a way to like get it across to them. And I don't know if I should just give up and just like keep doing what I'm doing and doing the, you know, activist work that I do, or if it's even worth like trying to change people's minds. Do you have any feelings about that?
No, I think it varies to a lot of people, and I think that I argue that there's a way to get through to everybody, a way to convince everybody over time, but it varies for each person. So you can't, you know, there's not really one particular thing that's going to work for one particular person, and sometimes it might require you know, a different person to come in and talk to that person, or a different person with some different ideas of some kind to convince that somebody. So if you're doing something and you feel like you're not getting anywhere, then maybe that's just because whatever argument or whatever way you're doing things is not necessarily, you know, isn't applicable or isn't going to function on that sort of that specific person. So you need to maybe let somebody else jump in there, or get like ideas from somebody else on how to do that. And that's the advantages of trying to expand the way that we do things, or expand the way that we get messages across, is that hopefully that increases the amount of people that we can potentially reach with ideas. And so that's the big idea behind the attempts to try to get more people involved in making content, or get more people involved in going out and talking to people and that kind of thing. Is that sort of stuff? Yeah. I think that's good. Like, just watching kind of like something like BreadTube kind of grow and become more of a thing has been kind of like, I feel like that has helped a lot in bringing people over, or because I feel like if there's like some sort of entertaining content to deliver these kinds of ideas, it kind of might, you know, like if I can just show someone a video instead of trying to explain everything like off the top of my head, like, and the video's entertaining, then it might be more convincing to them or something like that, you know? Yeah, I think
so people making content is I think an important part of like the growing left. It's important to get more people out there doing stuff, especially with regards to the fact that like we're currently nearing the end of second wave BreadTube, based off what I can see from that kind of thing. And the first wave BreadTube was the initial reaction to the anti-SJW, the anti right,
all that kind of stuff that came up. I should probably make a video on this now thinking about it.
Yeah, you should.
Like, there's a video idea here somewhere.
I haven't heard that. I haven't heard like there's different phases of BreadTube. I haven't heard of this, but I mean, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, so it's like with like any kind of movement like feminism, or like any kind of, or like there's normally like you can track specific groups of people, or groups of creators, or groups of people with ideas or specific content like around a certain kinds of ideas and a certain evolution they go through. So the initial BreadTube would be the ones that grew out of doing reactions or doing responses to alt-right, anti-SJW, Gamergators kind of thing. So people like H-Bomb, Philosophy Tube, ContraPoints, Sean, probably Free Arrows as well. But like those people like grew out of that kind of thing, and those were like there were not that many of them. There were like probably like maybe 10 or 12 that were like, you know, became well known and like kind of like did well out of that sort of stuff. But then they transitioned over the course of like 2 or 3 years into doing things completely differently, or like moving into doing some like of their own kind of unique-ish content, and moved away from that whole response kind of thing.
Yeah, you know, I remember I've been following Philosophy Tube before he started making political content. Like when he first started, it was literally like, we're talking about Schopenhauer and Hegel and shit like that, and now he's like making videos about how shitty capitalism is. So.
Yeah, but like I said, then we've had in the past, I would pinpoint it to about a year and a bit, maybe a year, maybe about 14 months, 13 months. In the past 13, 14 months, we've had a new bunch of content creators coming up as like new people, basically, blowing up out of nowhere, doing really, really well, who are doing things quite differently to the way that it started out, because these aren't people that are they're not coming out of so much doing reactions to right-wing people. They're coming out of communities of people that, grew, kind of like got into YouTube based off of listening to those original people. So they're coming in with more trying to present ideas in a different way, or trying to do things in a different way. And there's like a different like style of content that they do. And like those people do stuff like thinking about like The Surfs, Angie Speaks, Fort Slime. I'm not doing a video right now, so like my actual like list of people is pretty low. But if I was doing a video, I'd have like 3 or 4 more examples in there.
You would belong in that camp too, I guess.
Yeah, I would belong in that camp.
Vosh is blowing up like crazy.
Like where these people grew up. I mean, Vosh is different. Vosh is actually slightly different. Vosh is, if anything, he's from a slightly different area, which is he's more from a Destiny background.
Yeah.
Which is not quite the same as a lot of the creators that I see. Most of the creators that I see as like being part of the second wave of BreadTube weren't necessarily like they heard of Destiny and they watched Destiny. I would probably include Destiny in that initial wave of BreadTube.
Yeah, but I actually watched like some Destiny debates with like some alt-right people, and I thought Destiny's kind of cool. He's a really smart guy, and now I just he seems to have, I don't know what happened to him. Maybe he's losing his mind. I'm not sure.
Destiny is, as I can tell from watching him talk about stuff, Destiny is moderately competent when it comes to talking about social progressiveness and economic liberal. But when it comes to an argument about specifically socialism versus capitalism kind of thing, he is a lot weaker purely because he doesn't spend a lot of time looking into it or thinking about it very much. He's very active against like trying to learn anything about it, which hurts his ability to talk about it as efficiently, competently as he would otherwise.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that. All right, so maybe just a couple more fun topics before we let you go. Can I tell you probably my favorite episode or my favorite video of yours that I've seen is your South Park episode, because I had no idea, like I haven't like watched South Park in I don't know, many years, probably like 7-8 years, and to come across your video and learn that like South Park is doing like Marxism stuff now. What? I was so confused, but like I don't know, like I'm trying to figure out like what happened to make them do something like that, because they've always been like hardcore libertarians, like Libertarian Party libertarian, like anarcho-capitalist libertarian, and that's always been their motivation to like come from that perspective and then like mock both the left and the right from the position of a libertarian. I don't know. Do you have any idea like what could have motivated them to move in that direction, or to make these episodes of South Park that seem more lefty?
My guidance as to why that happened, and like after watching elements of the new season they came out, which was posted those 2 final episodes, where ultimately what ended up happening, but that's kind of storyline with regards to like the Tegrity Farms and that kind of thing, was the Tegrity Farms ended up growing from being a small-time business to being another big business that sold out its values to sold its values out to effectively work for places like China and whatnot. Like they sold out their values about like caring for people and caring for like any kind of integrity. They sold their integrity kind of thing, right? Like,
right.
So, but like the which people took that as being like, oh well, clearly look, they hate the this is them hating on like the socialism. I'm like, ultimately, like the Integrity Farms thing, like that wasn't like the people working together to overthrow the corporation or to like get rid of like Jeff Bezos was an element of socialism, but like a a corporation growing up to fill the same spot and then ultimately becoming another big bad corporation who ends up exploiting people and then ends up like selling people down the line, like isn't anti-socialism. It's anti like the fact that even if we, it's still anti. I'd say it's still anti-corporations. It's anti-capitalist. It's anti the idea that even if it's like it starts off as like a good small town venture that's trying its best to just be helpful to people and do what's right. Even then, they will end up becoming, if they're given enough time to grow, they'll end up growing and becoming the same kind of things that they initially, were designed, were built to respond to or built to go against, kind of thing. So I felt like that episode, that transition there, if anything, was more of a criticism of like these people who believe that the best fix for big corporations is just small corporations instead. But it's arguing that if we just have small corporations will end up, given time, they will end up becoming the exact same thing that they hate, or you end up becoming exactly what they were designed to fight against. So I think honestly the reason why I think South Park has got one of that is because South Park itself was never explicitly set a tone as such. South Park quite often I found was more of a reflection of a tone. Yeah. So earlier on that like libertarian value kind of thing, where like the big goal was to mock all politics or mock all kind of thing, was built out of like the Bush era. It was built out of that kind of thing, right? Where like there were people weren't hated politics, like people weren't interested in politics. People were kind of over the fact that like everyone was saying the same things and nothing seemed to change, or no one seemed to care about it, kind of thing. Like the post-Clinton, into Bush kind of thing, where both Clinton and Bush, when you look past like what they were saying, like were almost the exact same kind of thing policy-wise. Like it was it was a reflection of this attitude of like of disenfranchisement, of why should I give a shit about politics because the politicians don't care about us, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, but I still think that like Trey Parker and Matt Stone, at least at that time, were ideologically libertarian. It wasn't just that they were like, oh, let's make fun of liberals and leftists and conservatives and have fun with that. So that's why I'm a little confused about their kind of like their tonal shift. But I remember like this one episode that was in like one of the first couple of seasons where it was all about global warming and everyone was freaking out about global warming, and you would see the whole town like run away from something and freak out, and then nothing happens. Like and now apparently like they have a little bit of a different take on global warming.
Yeah, well, they had a global warming episode that basically another man bear pig episode that effectively the whole episode was it was man bear pig was real and was killing people, but people were so convinced that it wasn't real because of the previous ones that they just ignored it even when it was murdering people. And then ultimately it was found that like man bear pig, the reason man bear pig exists was because man bear pig made a deal with the old people, where the old people would get access to all the cars and all the stuff, and in return man bear pig would come and murder all their children, kind of thing. So like it was literally and like the whole the whole thing there was, it was their episode effectively said, it was an episode of them basically admitting that they were wrong and they were part of the problem when it came to trying to pretend that climate change was overrated or it was overhyped and like it wasn't like such a big issue. And now they're looking at it and be like, we helped to create this kind of climate of people not caring about climate change or dismissing it, even when it's like actively destroying things in front of their eyes. So I think like these most recent seasons have been, to a degree, I think like there's been an evolution of like the way that they perhaps as people see the world, or that they kind of like see things working. And then there have been new writers that have joined the show as well in the past couple of seasons that I would say are much more left-wing writers and much more left-leaning people who perhaps have been like have been working their ideas into that kind of thing. But I'd also say that it's possible that Trey Parker and whatnot have as people have possibly evolved the way that they view things. As happens. I mean, we like to think that people don't change, like their ideology and stuff, but that happens a lot. People do change over time. People do evolve the way that they think, and that, I mean, that's like, there's an element of like disbelief when it happens so clearly, but like I don't think it's unreasonable to say, to think that maybe they've maybe finding out that they're wrong about some stuff has made them think more critically about what they kind of say.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm gonna have to go back and I'll probably maybe watch some of those episodes, and just because that's super interesting to me. Brandon, do you have anything else you'd like to talk to our guest about?
Honestly, like, my head's reeling a little bit because you have firmly established that you're much smarter than me, and I appreciate that. So, yeah.
I don't know that being true, but yeah.
Well, like I said, like, you know the things that you're talking about, and I have a feeling you don't usually engage in things that you don't know about, and then go look them up, which I really appreciate because most people will not do that.
Yeah, well, there is some stuff that that I know I'm not very good with, and normally when it comes to that kind of thing, I'll normally try and direct those people to those who can talk about it. I think a good example would be economical organization and whatnot, or that kind of thing. I'm not great when it comes to economic organization. If someone wanted to sit down and talk to me about the way that about the construction of economy in capitalism versus socialism, I know that I would not be able to do as good a job as other people can, so I'd probably direct them to someone like Vosh is pretty good with that kind of thing. Vosh seems to know what he's talking about when it comes to that kind of thing, so I'll probably direct them towards Vosh and whatnot. I know that I'm meant to be having a conversation with Vosh at some point soon to talk about economic construction in communism. I might throw something out there.
Well, cool. I really appreciate you talking to us and taking the time out. It's been a pleasure talking to you. To our audience, if you've never heard of Gutian, go check out Gutian's channel. She's obviously really intelligent person, and she makes great content. Sorry, what?
I sound so much better, and then people go to the channel like, okay.
Anyway, yeah. So yeah. Thanks for coming on, and hopefully we'll talk again sometime.
Yep, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Have a good one.
You too.